Welcome to our Wednesday video. Just as a quick warning, I do use profanity in my videos. If you're offended, please leave the video now because I'm not going to change the way I speak to make you happy. This is RPGDad and this is our Wednesday video. Today, my topic is theater of the mind sucks. Now, let's face it, the whole concept of theater of the mind falls back to the old days where people were romanticizing everything about original RPGs like first edition D&D, first edition AD&D, stuff like that. And back in the day, if you were lucky, you had minis. But most people didn't. They were expensive, they were hard to find, and it just was not part of the game for most people. This was our map. Crappy graph paper. If you were lucky, you had one person who was you know what, this is making noise. You had one person who was the cartographer and they would map. They'd map your dungeons. Each little square was 10 feet. Some groups it might have been 5 feet. Ours we ran, it was 10 feet. You'd go down, DM would say, okay, you're going down a hallway. It's 30 feet long. Bam, bam, bam. They draw their 30 feet. Now there's a door. You'd put your door there, your little symbol. Then you draw the room when you open the door and you see the room full of skeletons, ogres, orcs, whatever is in there. And that was how we mapped. You didn't do combat using that. You had a general idea, but still, each square is 10 feet, so you didn't have a whole lot of idea of where your characters were really going, speed, stuff like that. The reality was, everything was happening in your mind, and everybody had a different idea in their head. So you ended up with a lot of confusion. Nobody sits back and romanticizes the reality of theater of the mind, arguing, you can't go that far. That blast is not that big. It can't do this. You can't do that. Now, what's the answer to this? Not using theater of the mind. And the beautiful thing is they came out with things called miniatures, and they came out with 1-inch grid squares to put your miniatures on. You can't argue about distance. You know you move 30 feet, you move those 6 squares. Bam, bam, bam. The guy doesn't get to cheat and move 10, 12 squares and say, I can make it that far. And let's face it, that's what happened. Everybody cheesed in the game. That is one of the biggest downfalls of theater of the mind. The fact that anybody can cheese. The DM, the magic user that wants to make his blast do more than it should. All of that. Now the reality is, what did first edition AD&D have in it? It had speeds. Why did it have that? Because the foundation of D&D was in a miniature role-playing game called Chainmail. Now, did you hear that? A miniature game, a miniature combat game. It used minis, you role-played, you played the game. The first rules of D&D that came out were based off of, you had to have Chainmail, you had to have the minis, you had to have supplements, you had to have an Avalon Hill game. All of these things used grids, they all used miniatures, cardboard things to represent so you could see the movement. That's where these games came from. The basis of these games were combat games. They added the role-playing element, and you still had the ability to use your miniatures, your grids, and everything you had to play combat in your role-playing game. Now, there are probably a couple of reasons that people didn't use minis back then. One, they didn't start with Chainmail. They didn't have the rules, they didn't have the minis, the grids, all the stuff that you started off with when you first started playing the game when it came out. The second reason, you were too damn cheap to buy the minis. I honestly think that that's still the reason people don't want to use minis, because they're too damn cheap to spend $5 on a fucking mini. If you're too cheap to spend on a mini, I guarantee you've got a friend sitting next to you at the table that has like a half a dozen minis or more, and he can go, here, use this. You've got guys at the table, girls at the table that have minis, paint them, they enjoy collecting them. Use the minis. This theater of the mind bullshit is just more stuff that needs to die off. There's nothing to romanticize about. It's not superior. It doesn't make combat any faster using your mind. It makes it more convoluted and leaves openings for more people to argue with the you can or can't do that and have stupid arguments at the table. I know, we saw it, we did it. It's dead. It's done. Let it go. Theater of the mind sucks. Get over it. Minis, maps, for RPGs, for all these things we're using that require combat, that you have speeds, you have specific things, minis and maps are superior. Theater of the mind is a dinosaur. Let that bitch die. Thanks for watching. That's the end of our video. It's a quick one. RPGDad has some stuff that I think he wants to talk about next week. He does have some things that he does not like about current iterations of the game, as well as some of the stuff that we've seen in the existing games like 4th edition and back that he's played. That's the end of this video. Be on the watch out for either RPG Nate or myself to do any future videos. So thanks again for watching. Be sure to check back tomorrow when we have our Encounters wrap up and all the rest of our series. Thanks again. RPG Dad signing off. Bye.